Hello, a very good afternoon to the respected judging panel, Madam Daisy and Madam Ida, the wonderful moderator, Miss Arina, and the amazing timekeeper, Miss Corinne. I, Brandon David Ryman, supervised under Madam Rosemary, will be presenting my action research on using one for all scratch game to improve Year 5 pupils' understanding of prepositions. First and foremost, grammar holds an important role in acquiring English as a second language. This is stated by Dibata in 2013. It is important that we have correct and proper grammar to make sure that we are able to convey what we would like to say to each other when speaking English. However, Gordon in 2012 stated that pupils face problems with the use of prepositions. Prepositions is defined as a word or a group of words that comes before a noun or pronouns that show time, place, direction, and also the relationship between objects. In my opinion, when I read through this, I realized that educational games in the form of Scratch seemed like a good mean of intervention, and this led me to carry out this action research. So let us look into the context of my action research. So I have been on two practicums. First one and the second one were both for year 5 pupils from a suburban school. My pupils consisted of mixed abilities ranging from low to intermediate levels that came from different cultural and socio-economic backgrounds. And all of them were actually from non-English speaking community. I realized that many of them preferred to speak in Malay and were not really good in English. So during my 3 months in both schools, so a total of 6 months, I realized that my pupils faced difficulty in using the correct prepositions and had trouble paying attention in class. During the class, they were sometimes yawning, sleeping, or looking outside the classroom and not paying attention to what I was teaching. This was when I was using traditional talk and chalk method and when I was not using any technology in the class. However, when I started to use technology and games in the classroom, I realized that this drew their attention and made them even more focused. That being said, I slowly began to work on creating scratch games to help them learn better. And finally, I created one for all scratch game. By using one for all scratch game, pupils will be able to improve their use of prepositions. And that is what I expected before starting the action research. So let us look into my intervention, which is one for all Scratch game. So Scratch is a block-based visual programming language and website targeted primarily at children from the age of 8 to 16 as an educational tool. So my intervention, which is one for all Scratch game, it's a learning tool that is to be used in the presentation, practice, and production stage. These few stages will be further explained in the stages of action. Moving on to my research focus, one for all Scratch game works as a tool to attract the pupils' attention. And finally, it serves as a reinforcement so that pupils can remember the meaning and usage of prepositions. So yes, it works well. What is the significance of one for all Scratch game? Well, it aims to improve pupils' understanding of prepositions that is learned in the syllabus of year 5. And it aims to enhance the elements of fun learning to make the lesson meaningful throughout the teaching and learning process. Because we are using gamification in the classroom, it is more fun than just the normal talk and chalk and also worksheet method. So lastly, we look into the practicality. Is it practical to be used in class? Yes, it is. First of all, it's very easy to use with clear instructions at the beginning of the game. Second, it is flexible, means that teachers like you and I are able to edit it and also adapt to suit the lesson. Because all the blocks in Scratch game is editable. I can change the prepositions to suit year 4 and year 6. And I can also change it to other grammar items like nouns, pronouns, so on and so forth. Lastly, it runs in a free application, so teachers do not need to pay for anything because Scratch is a free-for-all website. And it can also be downloaded to be available offline. So it is very practical. Okay, so moving on to my initial data collection. This was carried out in the first week of my second practical. So firstly, I carried out observation. When I was in the class for the first week, I taught them using the traditional method just to test out and to see how my pupils were. So based on my observation, I noticed that in the class, pupils were yawning, they were speaking in Malay to their friends, they were talking a lot to their friends instead of paying attention to me. Some of them, when they were sitting down and not talking, they would be staring outside the classroom and daydreaming. Lastly, they did not finish their task on time because most of the time they were sleeping or they were talking, and they did not participate actively in the lesson. So overall, they barely showed any excitement or motivation to learn. Moving on to my second method of initial data collection, I carried out a diagnostic test with 20 pupils in my classroom, and that consisted of 20 multiple choice questions on prepositions. So as you can see here, these are the marks that my pupils have scored in. So 6 pupils have scored below 5 over 20, and they were selected as my participants. So this is a sample of the pre-test. Okay, so moving on to my action. For the first cycle, what I did was that I used One for All Scratch game in the practice and production stage. In the first cycle, I did not have other stages. I did not use it in other stages. And I collected the data via worksheets and realized that pupils could not remember the proper usage of the prepositions when they were carrying out the practice and production stage. I realized that along the way, they forgot what they had already learned in the presentation stage without the usage of Scratch. Therefore, in cycle 2, I decided to add sections in the One for All Scratch game that enabled it to also be used in the presentation stage. And then once more, I collected my final data from the worksheet 3, and I noticed that pupils were able to refer to the meaning of the prepositions in the section for introduction to prepositions. So the focal point of my research, let us look into the research objectives and the research questions. So first of all, my first research objective was to investigate the extent of improvement in understanding of prepositions among Year 5 pupils with the implementation of One for All Scratch game. I wanted to see how far they could improve. And second, my second research objective was to identify the benefits of using One for All Scratch game in teaching prepositions among Year 5 pupils. That being said, my research questions when I was carrying out my action research was first, to what extent has the implementation of One for All Scratch game improved Year 5 pupils' understanding of prepositions? And the second one is, what are the benefits of using One for All Scratch game in teaching prepositions among Year 5 pupils? So as I said earlier, 6 participants were selected from a class of 20 pupils. So first of all, in the presentation stage, as you can see there, pupils press the introduction to prepositions button. When they press that button, they will enter a section whereby they will once more be reminded about the meanings of prepositions, the usage of prepositions like between, among, under, on, so on and so forth. So once they have already relearned these prepositions, they will move on to the practice stage, whereby pupils will be divided into groups, but still playing the Scratch game. They will press the group work prepositions table. So as you can see there in the image, it is a prepositions table whereby pupils will arrange the prepositions based on their positions. So for example, the preposition on would be on top of the table and under would be under the table. Once they are done with the practice stage, they will move on to the production stage, whereby pupils press the pair work game button. In the pair work game button, they will first read descriptions on how to assemble a car. So this car, all the car parts are on the side, and then the description would be, for example, the door of the car is between the front and rear of the car. So pupils will know that the door of the car is in between. That preposition will show them the position, and they will assemble the car based on the description. So moving on, after they have finished assembling the car, they will move on to the next part of the game, which is there will be a map, and they will use that car to travel from one place to another based on the description, based on the directions given by the teacher. So the teacher could say, turn left, go right, go straight. And then pupils will move the car using the arrow keys on their computer. So they will listen to the directions and go from one place to another. Once they are done with the production stage, they will go to the final stage of the game, which is assessment. Assessment is carried out individually and could also be carried out in a group, but it is best recommended to be individual because we want to see each pupil's level of understanding. So in the assessment stage, pupils press the individual quiz button and answer a series of questions on prepositions. So in this individual quiz, the answer immediately comes out. Is it correct or not? And they can only go to the next question once they have answered correctly. Okay, so that being said, while carrying out all these actions, I had 3 data collection methods. The first data collection method was observation, whereby I had a checklist that helped me observe on the pupils' expressions, pupils' participations, and pupils' understandings. I will show this checklist in my findings. Next, my second method was pupils' work, whereby I gathered data from 3 worksheets and carried out post-tests. Yes. And I compared the measures of scores to determine the success of intervention. Okay, so like I said just now, I gathered data from actually two worksheets and carried out a post-test. And finally, I compared all those scores. And the last one was an interview, whereby I used a semi-structured interview to ask pupils open-ended and closed-ended questions in order to know how much the pupils enjoyed the intervention and how did it fare in increasing their understanding of prepositions. I will show all this data in my findings. So with all this data in hand, I analyzed them using, for example, for the first one, the observation, I extracted data from the checklist on the pupils' expression, pupils' participation, and pupils' response. And I used thematic coding to code the themes and look through what made these pupils feel this way. So the next one was pupils' works. Pupils' works, I tabulated the results of the worksheets and presented the results in a bar chart. And then I finally compared the results to see whether there was an improvement in their result. The last data analysis method was for my interview, whereby I highlighted keywords from the interview's transcript and used thematic coding once more to differentiate the themes that I wanted to highlight on. So thematic coding, as mentioned by Gibbs in 2017, uses differentiated colors to represent differentiated themes. I will explain this right now. So the themes in thematic coding, I have selected 4 themes and I have coded them based on 4 colors: red, purple, blue, and green. So the first theme, which is red, which is coded red, is increases pupils' attention during class. So there's an increase in pupils' attention during class. I put there OC1, which actually means observational checklist. So this theme, I used observational checklist to see whether or not my pupils paid attention in the class. For the purple code, I use infusion of fun elements, and this was observed both ways. First, in observational checklists, and second, in the semi-structured interview. The blue one, development of pupils' participation in class, used only observational checklists, and I labeled it as OC3. The final theme, which is development of pupils' understanding of prepositions, was labeled OC4 and SIF2, which meant that I used both observational checklists and semi-structured interview feedback. Okay, so finally, we will reach my research findings that for the first question, which is research question 1, I asked, to what extent has the implementation of One for All Scratch game improved Year 5 pupils' understanding of prepositions? So, firstly, I implemented the intervention in the class, my One for All Scratch game, and then I noticed that the pupils' understanding in prepositions increased, and this was shown in based on their scores. Pupils scored higher in the post test. So as you can see in the bar chart on the right, pupils marks comparison. So for the first one was the first worksheet, second was the second worksheet, and the third one, the third one was the third worksheet, or as I like to call it, post test. So this has shown us a great increase, from the first to the last worksheet. So it can be seen that One for All Scratch game has greatly improved pupils' understanding of prepositions. So the research findings for question number 2 is that what are the benefits of using One for All Scratch game in teaching prepositions among Year 5 pupils? So firstly, the first benefit is that it attracts pupils' attention during class. Second, it infuses fun learning. Third, it develops pupils' participation in class. And lastly, One for All Scratch game improves pupils' understanding of prepositions. Let me show you the proof to why I say this. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I use thematic coding. So as you can see here in my observational checklist data, I have coded the keywords in each checklist, in each part of the checklist, each item in the checklist based on the thematic coding. So as you can see in the after section of the table, it shows the increase in all these themes after using One for All Scratch game. Next, we will look into the interview sample. So interview sample, I have highlighted keywords from the transcript. These are two samples of the transcript that I have interviewed my pupils. So the first one was with participant A. As you can see, the highlighted one there, when I asked him, did you enjoy learning using One for All Scratch game? He said yes. So that is already the semi-structured. And then I followed up with a question, why? So he said, because fun than book. Of course, as a pupil, his grammar was a bit off, but we understood that he said that it was more fun than just using normal textbooks, normal worksheets. So I highlighted the word fun and put it in the theme fun learning. So the next one is the next question with participant C is, do you understand prepositions better after using One for All Scratch game? I highlighted understand prepositions better because of the theme improve pupils' understanding of prepositions. So as you can see, the participant C said yes. And then at the end of the interview, semi-structured interview, all pupils said that they preferred Scratch over the traditional method of teaching grammar. Both of these, the interview sample and also the observational checklist data, shows and it also proves the benefits of One for All Scratch game. So as a reflection, based on all my findings, I have finally concluded that One for All Scratch game is highly motivating and entertaining, and it attracts pupils' attention. It is a good way of practicing the language in a fun gaming environment. One for All Scratch game develops pupils' participation during the class, which is seen via observation. And finally, it improves pupils' understanding of prepositions. However, of course, I did realize some areas of improvement that I could work on in the future. First of all, because it has been such a useful tool, I realized that this one for all Scratch game could be made available for more grammar items, not just prepositions, but also nouns, pronouns, so on and so forth. And it could be made available for different years, ranging from year 3 to year 6. However, I did realize that I should take advanced and remedial pupils into consideration. Of course, in this action research, I focus on the 6 participants. However, I did use this intervention in the whole class. So I realized that for some pupils who were in the advanced stage of the class, they answered all the questions from the practice until the assessment stage easily. And in the end, they were just sitting down there waiting for further instruction. However, the remedial students took a longer period of time. So with that being said, I realized that I should make more sections that would cater for both advanced and remedial pupils. Finally, I feel that it would be better if I could integrate audio elements, especially in the presentation stage, whereby I would include voice that would reteach pupils on the prepositions. So finally, these are my references. I am done. So thank you so much for listening to my action research presentation, and I'm ready for your questions.